running backs still matter in fantasy football a whole lot. But I have to ask, do you know which ones you should be targeting in 2023? Let's take some time to break down the best running back in every single round of your draft so you're prepared at all times. Now, it all begins with Nick Chubb early on in round 1 of your drafts. Now, this will matter obviously if you have a middle to later round pick. Otherwise, I want guys like Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley. But otherwise, you can see Nick Chubb right here. He goes 13th or 12th overall, right around the end of the first round. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but Nick Chubb, what he's done over the last 4 years is impressive. He's one of only 2 running backs to finish each of the last 4 years as a top 10 running back in fantasy football, as you can see right here. And now his biggest competition for this year, Jerome Ford, just injured his hamstring in training camp. And if you see the quote from his head coach, Kevin Stefanski, right here, he believes the second-year running back still has a chance to suit up for week 1, but it doesn't seem all that great. I'm hopeful, but I can't go past that. It's truly week to week, as you can see right there. So look, he might not even have a true backup to start the year. Now, this injury has led to Chubb seeing all the passing down work in camp, and the coaches have been impressed. And Chubb's coming off of a year where he played all 17 games, had over 1,500 rushing yards, had over 200 receiving yards, almost 1,800 total yards. And now Vegas believes he's going to do it all over again. As you can see, Andrew points out here, the betting markets believe that fantasy football drafters should be taking Nick Chubb because he's the favorite to lead the league in both rushing yards and touchdowns this year. And if this guy is the favorite to lead the league in rushing yards and touchdowns, he's going to easily finish as a first rounder. And now Chubb will enter year 2 of the Kevin Stefanski offense without Kareem Hunt. Now, this is pretty important because look what I have highlighted here. Nick Chubb, this number right here, 47%, 46.8% to be exact, is the amount of red zone carries he saw on his team. So he saw just under half of them. This ranks 16th in the NFL because Kareem Hunt was seeing over 30% of the red zone work, but now he's gone. So expect even more touchdown opportunities this year. And if Deshaun Watson can return to his normal form, he's going to see a lot more red zone chances. All right, now we'll move to round 2 where we'll talk about the Tennessee Titans running back, the best target in round 2, Derrick Henry. Now, if you're just getting back into fantasy football, you might be saying there's no way he's a second round pick. No, he is. Look at this, 16th overall. He goes around the middle of the second round. Derrick Henry, for the first time in almost 5 years, is not a first round pick in fantasy. But I'd like to say that this is a mistake because he bounced back from a 2021 injury to play last year and finished as the RB4 in fantasy. Now, it is important to call out that Derrick Henry is 29 years old. He turned 29 in January, and this is usually time we start to see some running backs wearing down. But Henry was actually asked how he feels at 29 in an interview posted here on Twitter. You can go ahead and watch it if you want to on your own time. But basically, he said, I feel like I'm 21, and because of sports medicine and how my body is being rehabbed and treated all the time, he's performing like a 25-year-old according to the sports science. And it's hard to argue with him when he says he's basically in the prime of his career because last year, he led the NFL in rush attempts, set a career high in receiving usage, and was the #1 RB in total yards before his week 16 injury. And his new receiving wrinkle might be here to stay. His 132 routes run last year was the second most of his career. Obviously, it's hard to have a lot of routes run when you're running the ball 20 times per game, but he earned a target on 31% of these routes, which was top 5 amongst running backs. So Henry remains in an efficient offense that might only get more efficient with DeAndre Hopkins there, and now he has no actual competition yet again this year. Now for the best running back in round 3, it's actually not Breece Hall. It was going to be Breece Hall, but then obviously the Dalvin Cook news happened and we have to push down Hall. Dalvin Cook received a contract that's worth up to $8.6 million, much more than any other team was willing to pay him, almost double what any other team wanted to pay him. But now don't get me wrong, I'm still a fan of Breece Hall, and now we get to get him probably in like the 5th round of drafts. Just picture Breece Hall as now the Aaron Jones in this Aaron Rodgers-led offense, a guy who's going to see 55 to 60% of the snaps, but still finish every year as a productive back. Because reminder, this is where Aaron Jones has finished the last 4 years of his career in this Aaron Rodgers offense that's teamed up with Nathaniel Hackett, now in New York, so it's going to be the same offense here, 11th, 4th, and 3rd. That's the type of upside Breece Hall still has. And we have to address this contract that is 1 year, $7 million as a base salary and guaranteed, basically double what any other team the Dolphins were trying to give Dalvin Cook, and it's likely because Aaron Rodgers took a salary cut and then said, go get Dalvin Cook. So they are invested in Cook, but it's sort of like just trying to make Aaron Rodgers happy and win this Super Bowl. So now we're in the 3rd round of drafts, and with Breece Hall now gone, not really a fan of Travis Etienne, there's not a lot of options here, except right here in Rhamondre Stevenson, who will likely fall to the middle to end of the 3rd round. And yes, Ezekiel Elliott did sign a 1-year deal with the Patriots, but it's only having $1 million in guaranteed money, which is basically below average or average for your standard backup running back. And Zeke is still a fine player when it comes to pass protection and short yardage runs, but let's be honest, most backups in the league are good in pass pro and short yardage runs. Zeke just has a big brand behind him. Zeke's lack of investment, his lack of skills in the receiving game now, and his performance last year still makes Rhamondre a top 10 back. And look, Stevenson last year only earned 63% of his team's opportunities, and he was still a top 10 running back. So even if Zeke's going to earn 30 to 40% of the opportunities, Stevenson still has the upside. And last year, he had to compete with a better running back in Damian Harris than Ezekiel Elliott now is. And yes, that's right. The last 2 years, Damian Harris has been a more efficient running back in yards per touch than Ezekiel Elliott. So this means Rhamondre will remain the starter, and as a starter, he averages 15.1 fantasy points. That would have been top 10 last year. Now we head to round 4 and we look at the rookie in Detroit, Jahmyr Gibbs. Right now, Gibbs is basically being taken often as the RB15 right at the start of the 4th round of drafts, and this guy is an electric player. He secured top 12 draft capital from the Lions. They were very eager to go up and get him. They've been saying a lot of great things about him, and it makes sense. He's dynamic. Look at this receiving production alone, which for running backs, when you earn a target, it's worth almost 3 times as much as a carry in fantasy because of what you can do after the catch in the receiving department. He had 44 catches last year alone. If you have 20 as a running back in college, that's good. He had more than double that. And his target shares every single year, anything over 10% is like elite. He had 11, 14, and 13%. He knows how to get open and make the best of his targets. Now, the main concern for Jahmyr Gibbs coming out is that he's under 200 pounds. He's 199 pounds when most top 24 running backs are at least 205 pounds. But this is offset based on the fact that he was taken top 12 overall. He's now going to be used. And as you can see right here, Dwayne McFarland said that we don't really need a lot of rush attempts. Alvin Kamara and Christian McCaffrey didn't even see 30% of their backfield carries and still finished as rookies as RB3 and RB9. And when it comes down to money, if you want to look at it like that, yeah, David Montgomery signed to this team for like $5.5 million a year. And on his rookie contract alone, 4 years for almost $18 million, you're going to get like $4.5 million a year for Jahmyr Gibbs. So the money in terms of incentives that way is basically even between these two backs. But Gibbs is just a far better athlete than Montgomery. Montgomery in his own right is a very good athlete, but when you compare these two guys, Gibbs is more dynamic. And as you can see from Alex Russo's tweet right here, the last 5 running backs to be drafted in the top 12 their rookie year, look at these finishes. Saquon in 2018 finished RB2 overall. McCaffrey, RB11. Fournette, RB8. Zeke, RB2, and Todd Gurley, RB7. So you're basically a top 12 back if you're drafted that early, which is good news for Jahmyr Gibbs, who's going to start his season off with maybe the best matchup on the entire year. Because the NFL season starts on Thursday night with the Chiefs versus Lions. This game has like a 55-point total already. The Lions are expected in this one to be scoring closer to 25 points, which means he's probably going to see a lot of usage. And if he goes off for a 20+ point fantasy game in week 1, oh, you could flip him for basically any player you want if you really wanted to get to the trade market. So there's a little strategy talk for you. Now let's go to round 5 where Miles Sanders, the new Panthers workhorse back, is. He's currently going right here at the beginning of round 5. And honestly, the other guys in this range, there's some good wide receivers that I'd rather target, but if you need an RB here, it is Sanders. If you watch this video on Twitter that Josh Norris posts, it's basically Miles Sanders sitting in a room with his head coach, his offensive coordinator, and what they're doing is saying, hey, remember last time that you were with Deuce Staley, your running back coach who's here now? You had 50 catches. How about we do that again? And in those 2 seasons with Deuce Staley, here's what he did. He had 50 catches as a rookie, averaged over 1,200 yards a year, and averaged a top 20 fantasy finish. And he was just paid to be the workhorse, the most money in free agency this offseason amongst any running backs. And with the AP Charlotte, the Associated Press is reporting, Miles Sanders will be used as a 3-down back this year. Very encouraging. Here's some even more positive news and a positive drumbeat, if you will, on Miles Sanders. The expectation is that Sanders will hover around 15 carries and average 3 to 5 receptions a game. So 18 to 20 potential touches per game. I mean, that is borderline top 5 running back production. You get even more excited when you realize that they didn't draft any running backs. They basically didn't sign anybody significant in free agency. So now this is his backfield. To round 6 we go, and we look at the Tampa Bay running back Rachaad White. Now White's a really good value because he's going as the last pick in the 6th round, 72nd overall, meaning you can often get him in the 7th round of drafts. And right now, all reports out of training camp are great. Look at this last point right here. White will get a heavy workload rushing, and the Bucs have expanded his route tree, meaning that he's going to be more involved in the receiving game. And it's been this positive news all offseason. It started back in February during the coaches meetings with his new offensive coordinator Dave Canals, saying Rachaad White has some strong skill set that really fits our system, most specifically if you read the quotes in the receiving game. And his offensive coordinator played against him in the Seattle game last year when Rachaad White had 100+ yards and was stiff-arming guys left and right. He really likes him. Now last year in this offense, Leonard Fournette was the number 12 running back overall. He has since been cut, and he wasn't even all that efficient last year. But it was because of this right here that Leonard Fournette was an RB1, a top 12 running back. He was 3rd in both running back receptions and receiving yards. He didn't even have a lot of touchdowns. Just 6 was outside the top 20, but that receiving usage propelled him to a top 12 finish. And now we get Rachaad White in this role, who finished top 10 in running back receptions last year as a rookie, and in college was an elite RB receiver. You can see that right here. In his final year of college, he had a 16% target share. I mean, this is more than double in average RB's usage, triple in average RB's usage in college with 43 receptions. He led his team with 456 receiving yards out of any position. And right now he doesn't have any real competition. Chase Edmonds and Keyshawn Vaughn are battling firmly for the RB2 spot in camp. Like, they don't even know who's the RB2 or RB3. Patrick Laird might not even make the teams, maybe as a special teamer. And Sean Tucker's getting some hype because a lot of people liked him in the draft cycle. He went undrafted because of his medicals. Maybe he makes the team. Like, right now he's on the RB4 at best on this roster. And if you want a little sample of Rachaad White as a starter in 2 games last year, he averaged 107 yards per game. Now let's get into the round 7 running back. And as we do that, make sure you hit the subscribe button on this channel so you can stay updated on all our latest releases for this fantasy season. Round 7, you want to be targeting the Bills' second-year running back, James Cook. This is where Cook currently goes. Now, I like Deontay Johnson at the wide receiver position. If you can somehow land both of them in these rounds 7 or 8, even better, but Cook is the running back you want. Now, he's been having a great camp so far. As you can see on the first line here, James Cook has been the mainstay on the Bills' first-team offense through the first 4 days, and now it's been the first 2 weeks of camp. He has been the RB1. And you might see some unofficial depth charts putting Damian Harris there. Harris is currently hurt as we're talking right now, and those unofficial depth charts are made by interns in the PR department. More on that later. One thing people might point to is his lack of targets last year in the receiving department, just 33. But keep in mind, most of the season he was behind Devin Singletary. It wasn't until the second half of the year he started to see more usage. And Cook earned a target on 30% of his routes run, which was 6th best amongst all RBs, and now he's going to earn more snaps and routes. And you can see his overall usage in the receiving game and offense continues to look better. This was the most recent camp reports. Cook's heavily involved in the passing game. He ended up getting 5 of Josh Allen's 19 passes, and Cook was easily the Bills' best offensive player with the first unit. And very quietly last year, he led the entire NFL in his percentage of explosive runs of 15 or more yards. I mean, look at the guys he's around. Breece Hall, Tony Pollard, Kenneth Walker. All of these guys are breakout running backs, and Cook is right there. And very quietly, he was stealing running back work to end 2022. Cook's snaps increased by 27% the final 6 weeks, while Devin Singletary's dropped by over 20%. And now this year, Singletary is gone, but the Bills did replace him. They brought in a couple of veteran running backs. First, Damian Harris, who right now is still banged up in camp, and he's a question mark if he's even going to be ready for week 1. And then Latavius Murray, who's actually the oldest running back at 33.5 years old in the NFL, which isn't the biggest competition. And not to mention Nyheim Hines, who was his threat for potential 2-minute and 4-minute offense and third down snaps. Well, he's out for the season now, so that role is all James Cook, which leads to a lot of checkdowns and fantasy points. Now we go to round 8, and this is potentially the best running back value in all of fantasy football, the Lions RB, David Montgomery. And I realize I've listed both Lions RBs here, and that's because they're both undervalued right now in drafts. Montgomery goes as the running back 30 in drafts. He's basically a top 25 guy for me this year. And here's a reminder. The Lions running backs earned the most opportunities per game in 2022. And now Montgomery is going to take the Jamal Williams role, and as you can see right here, Jamal Williams in the far right-hand column led every running back in inside the 10-yard carries last year. He had 16 more than any other RB. And not only that, he had over 80% of the carries inside the 5-yard line, the most of any RB. So now Montgomery is the clear goal line and red zone back. But Montgomery is a far better back than Jamal Williams in terms of production. Look at this his last 3 years. His rushing yards plus his receiving yards, he's averaged over 1,200 total yards a season. Now, like we said earlier, the rookie Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be the clear passing down back here, but if anything happens to Gibbs, Montgomery can easily hang as a receiver. Last year, he was 3rd in running back yards per reception and top 10 in yards per route run, which is the best efficiency metric for receivers. And in his last full season without an extremely mobile quarterback like Justin Fields, Montgomery was 4th in running back receiving yards and 5th in receptions. So he could be a top 5 RB if Jahmyr Gibbs misses time. Now we head to round 9, where Antonio Gibson from the Washington Commanders is of interest. Now last year, Gibson wasn't the greatest. Overall, he was 36th in running back yards per touch, a career worst, but he played his last 4 games with a fractured foot, which skewed his sample. Because in 11 healthy games last year, Gibson averaged 12.8 points, which was top 20 amongst running backs. And this top 20 amongst running backs was more than Travis Etienne, but now Travis Etienne goes as the running back 12 in fantasy, and Gibson is going as the running back 36. Not to mention, he has a new offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy from the Chiefs. He was there for the last 5 years, and Bieniemy's running backs average a top 20 fantasy finish. Now let's get into the round 10 and beyond targets that you want to get, the guys who can win you your leagues. But before we get there, if you actually want to win your league and take home a fantasy championship, smack around your friends, the Fantasy Blueprint is for you. It'll have all the tools and analysis you need to do just that. The people are loving it, and as you can see right here, Antonio Gibson, somebody we just talked about, my 82nd overall player in the top 255, 16 spots ahead of ADP. He is a strong value, and you can identify that with this tool. Now, the blueprint is extremely easy to access. You just click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on the screen and follow the 2 simple steps. This material is just $5 for the entire season, so not just for your draft, weeks 1 through 17 to your fantasy playoffs, and if you don't make your fantasy playoffs for some reason, this is risk-free. I'll just refund the $5. So if you'd like to join the thousands of others already using the Fantasy Blueprint to win their leagues this year, well, click the link below or scan that QR code. Now for round 10, we go to Seattle, where Zach Charbonnet is somebody that I have been recently drafting a ton of. I believe that drafting players in the later rounds who are younger with a lot of upside is a good idea, and that's where Charbonnet goes yards outside the top 100 right now. Now, he was banged up a week or two ago in camp, but he recently returned to practice from the shoulder injury. But meanwhile, his competition, Kenneth Walker, the rookie dominator from last year, the player who was great, he is still out, and it's questionable when he's going to return. Maybe by the time you're watching this, he returns, but as of right now, there's no timeline. This is the best timeline that we currently have from Sports MD Analysis on Twitter. Zach Charbonnet's already returned, but for Kenneth Walker, he said expect 4 to 6 weeks post-injury, so there's a high likelihood that he could return week 1, but some injury risk after that. 4 to 6 weeks, he might miss a week or two, this means. And in steps Zach Charbonnet. Here's what you need to know. This mega producer out of UCLA was drafted in the 2nd round by the Seahawks, significant draft capital. And when I say this mega producer, check this out right here. Between his rushing yards, nearly 1,400, his receiving yards over 300, he had over 17 or about 1,700 yards last year in college. And if we zoom in even closer here, he can also catch passes, which Kenneth Walker doesn't do. He had 37 receptions and over an 11% target share, elite numbers for a college RB. And you could check out some of the recent quotes from his coach, Pete Carroll. He says, look, he's so versatile. He just will fit in and be a great addition. And then you can basically see down here, he says, we want to see how far he can take it in terms of the receiving part of it. Now, obviously, Kenneth Walker is still there, but you have to at least keep this in mind. Walker was just 38th in running back consistency last year, and he's not much of a pass catching threat. So in round 10, Zach Charbonnet as a pass catching running back for a good offense and potentially could steal red zone work is a great pick. Now we go to round 11, where the San Francisco running back Elijah Mitchell is a strong handcuff option. The only thing is, can this guy stay healthy? Because on August 3rd, he hurt his adductor, his hip basically. He's expected to be missing about a week or so, but he's already back in camp at this point. But here's the thing. He's falling in drafts because people believe that he's injury prone. He was already hurt. Look, a hip sprain is a normal injury he would have played through during the regular season, but they just wanted to be cautious. And if Christian McCaffrey misses time, Mitchell's going to be the guy to step in and be a league winner. Because his current competition is the same as last year. San Francisco didn't add anybody. Jordan Mason never had a game over 10 touches, and Tyrion Davis-Price was a rookie last year that Mitchell beat out and only had 34 touches as a rookie. Now, Tyrion Davis-Price is doing well in camp right now, but so are so many players out there when you don't have the pads on. Everybody, of course, looks great. You can see there's some nice quotes stacking good days from Tyrion Davis-Price, but I have to see it on the field. I've seen Mitchell do it on the field. I've never seen Tyrion Davis-Price do it in the NFL. And in terms of Mitchell doing it on the field, keep this in mind. In his first 2 seasons, he ranks top 10 in fantasy points per touch, 14th in yards per touch, and 8th in running back efficiency. And Mitchell is a much better athlete than most of the guys in the league, especially Tyrion Davis-Price. His speed, burst, and agility all in the top 20% all time. And one more thing I'll leave you with right here. When Mitchell had to take over as the main running back in 2021, he saw the 3rd best opportunity share, 81% of the backfield targets and carries that year, the most of any Kyle Shanahan running back ever. All right, now let's head to round 12. Somebody we recently talked about in another video, but I continue to draft him in the 12th round, Tyler Allgeier. Now, of course, Bijan Robinson was drafted here and is the clear RB1 for Atlanta. And as I mentioned earlier, don't believe these unofficial depth chart hype things that you're seeing in the preseason. They're put together by literal interns in the PR department, not the coaching staff. Bijan is the RB1 on this team. But that doesn't mean that Tyler Allgeier can't be valuable for fantasy, because the 5th round pick was great last year. Look at this from Laquan Jones. 40% of Allgeier's carries last year were against stacked boxes, and he still managed to finish 2nd behind Derrick Henry on yards after contact versus the stacked boxes. The translation there is that he saw some of the most difficult running conditions, and he was still breaking tackles and ranking top 20 in efficiency. He put up as a 5th round rookie between his rushing and receiving yards almost 1,200 total yards, and he was setting multiple Atlanta Falcons records that year. Now, despite this, he's going as the running back 44 in drafts, but he still has upside for this season. If you need a 12th round back, look at him. And in round 13, another handcuff. A lot of handcuffs in this range. Obviously, you're not going to find starters down here, but Jaylen Warren in Pittsburgh could be a starter at some point this season. And look, compared to the guys who go around him, he is a true league winner, especially at the running back position. I mean, at the wide receiver position, maybe Rondale Moore looks good, but if you want an RB here in round 13, it's Warren. He's the clear running back 2 for the Steelers. They didn't draft anybody or sign anyone of note, but there's a chance he can take over RB1 responsibilities, because look at this. Jaylen Warren, to no surprise, is the best pass blocking running back on the team. He's been performing better than Najee Harris in this department. And last year, Warren was 12th overall in rushing efficiency and 11th when you factor in his receiving efficiency, his yards per touch amongst all backs, 40% better than Najee Harris, even when Najee was healthy before his Liz Frank. And speaking of Najee, he's now entering year 3, which is the year that 1st round capital from the NFL draft that Najee had starts to wear off a little. All right, now in round 14 of your drafts, target this rookie right here who could have all the upside in the world in Roschon Johnson out of Texas. The Bears took him in the 4th round of the NFL draft. He was arguably the best running back at the Senior Bowl, but then he ended up getting hurt, so he didn't perform the rest of the time there. But there's nobody else in this round of the drafts at the RB position that has his upside, because as of right now, he's doing everything right in camp. He's a former high school quarterback, so this right here is not surprising. He was the first player out at practice again today, the rookie Roschon Johnson. The kid is hungry. He continues to just be the guy out there leading this team as a rookie. And not only that, but he's doing something that is so important to getting running backs on the field, especially as rookies. I gotta say, he is one of the best best pass blocking running backs I've ever seen come into this league. That's high praise. And now that's going to matter in this backfield because last year Justin Fields was the most pressured quarterback. Almost 50% of his dropbacks he was pressured on. So if you can get a running back who can protect him back there, that's important. So he's going to be able to actually see some opportunities. And in his final 2 years of college, he actually led every single running back in broken tackle rate. So consider Roschon around 14 somebody you need to target. And you could target him and all the other running backs we talked about on Underdog, where they have a ton of best ball contests. This one has $15 million to first. This one has over 200,000, 300,000, 250,000. These contests are big. And the best thing about best ball is that you just draft and never have to change your roster. It automatically takes your highest scores and puts them into your lineup. Now, this is their flagship tournament, the biggest tournament ever in fantasy football. It has $3 million to first. You can see right here, 15 million in total prizes. It is Best Ball Mania 4 where you can compete for this money. Now, if you made it to this point in the video, you're going to be rewarded because if you use the link below and the code SAL, that's just SAL, you'll get your first deposit matched up to $100. So if you put in 20, you get 20 right back. If you want to put in 100, you get $100 right back to try and compete for your share at $3 million to first. Now, if you found this video helpful and want to kind of see the wide receiver you should be drafting, well, this one right here is going to show you the must draft wide receivers for 2023.